This is Bridges We Build, a podcast about the people, partnerships, and community connections that help others find hope, healing, and a path forward. Today, we're starting at the heart of it all with someone who lives and breathes this work every day, our CEO, Jennielynn Holmes. Jennielynn's leadership and vision have helped shape Caritas Village, regional partnerships, and countless services across the North Bay and Northwest California. But today, we're talking about something more personal, her story, her why, and the bridges she believes we all need to build to create lasting change. Jennielynn, welcome, and thank you so much for being here.
Thanks. This is very exciting.
So to kick things off, I'd love to hear your why and what brought you into this work and what fuels you to continue it.
Well, I'm excited to start with that. I think that the heart of what we do at Catholic Charities, you have a group of individuals who are incredibly driven by purpose and mission and desire to help those who are in need. And my journey started a long time ago. I was born and raised here in Santa Rosa. I grew up in Roseland, which is one of our lowest income parts of our community, and grew up in a household where we experienced housing insecurity and financial hardships. And for me, as a kid growing up in that, I think, there were several things that were challenging. One of them was kind of the stress that manifests, especially behind closed doors within the family, and that the kids can kind of carry with them. But the part that was even harder for me, and I only realized this recently in the last, half a decade of my career, but was the feeling of not belonging. It was the feeling that in this community that I was growing up in, I love and I live in today, I didn't belong. And, it was challenging, and the way that manifests in a child and in individuals without that sense of community, without that sense of a helping hand, it can really lead to incredibly challenging trauma and stress, and it manifests in our community in really unhealthy ways as well. And so my goal kind of growing up was I didn't want that for my adult life. So my goal became I wanted to be the first person in my family to go to college. And I was the first person to go to college and graduate college in my family. And I was so excited and so proud of being able to accomplish that. And then I realized when I got out of college, I had to, find what my career would be because I had been working towards that goal for so long. And so I decided to actually go to law school. And it's interesting given what I do today. I wanted to go to law school to be an immigration attorney.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, not a lot of people know that. But when I was in college, I got to know I had to work, a pretty significant amount of hours, and I got to know a lot of individuals who were, working and undocumented, and got to learn a little bit about their story and hear the injustices that kind of faced them and the challenges they had every single day. And I realized I wanted to, be an attorney to help those individuals. So, law school is expensive. And so out of college, I got 3 jobs right out of college. And one of them was a part-time counselor at Sam Jones Hall at Catholic Charities, which is our large single adult shelter in Southwest Santa Rosa. And I remember walking in, and I had no idea what I was walking into or what I was going to do, but was ready to get to work and try to help the community while saving money for law school and taking the LSATs, which is always fun. Mm-hmm. But I remember really, really quickly getting to know the individuals at our shelter and realizing they are the way that people perceive these individuals is absolutely the opposite of who they are. They are amazing individuals who have wonderful stories and a lot to contribute to our community, but for the fact that they do not feel connected or belonging in their community. And it reminded me a lot of what I was going through over the years and not feeling that sense of belonging, wanting so desperately to be able to do something and help and do a lot of great things. But for the fact that the community wasn't one that I felt I could do that in.
Yeah.
And so I quickly fell in love with the work and, more importantly, the mission of Catholic Charities. And there was one little girl, a little bit, a couple years into my journey, that set me on this pathway forever. And her name was Hannah, and I got to know her very well. I was actually the first person she met when they came into the family shelter, our old family shelter on A Street. And she came in, and I just remember how scared she was, and she couldn't look me in the eye. And it was just, there was this immediate connection to the girl I felt. And I knew what she was going through because it was something I personally identify with, having lived through it myself. And so I kind of took a personal connection into helping her, get into school, help them family get settled. And I'll never forget, it was a couple months into her journey, or her time with us at the shelter. And I remember just hearing this running down the hallway, and in comes Hannah waving this piece of paper at me. And she goes, "Miss Jenny, look, look, look." And I opened up the piece of paper, and it was her progress report. And she was getting all A's and B's.
Oh, yay.
And I was so, so proud of her. But like the moment that still sticks with me and like brings tears to my eyes at this point, she looked at me like so serious, and she goes, "Miss Jenny, do you want a copy that you can hang on your wall?" And I was like, oh my gosh. And like sitting there reconciling the girl that walked through the front door, like just a couple months before, and the girl that was standing in front of me was like night and day. And that's what I realized, like Catholic Charities is different. What we do is different. We take the people and we serve the people that no one else will serve. Yeah. And we don't just provide them food and shelter and all the things that they absolutely need and deserve, but we really just give them hope, and we help them feel connected, and we help them feel belonging in a way that psychologically they can heal from the trauma that brought them into homelessness. But you can see the change in a human being within just a couple of months of feeling safe with us and safe in community. And so at that point, law school was out, and I went back to grad school to get my master's in public administration. And then I never left, and here I am at Catholic Charities 16 years later.
I love that. And I think it's so important. You kind of touched on like the holistic kind of approach to it is so important, because so many people feel like, okay, it takes just one simple thing to solve the challenge of homelessness. But it's this whole approach, because you're not just trying to solve a problem. You're trying to like work back and figure out what the trauma was, or what the systemic cause was of that.
Yeah, if we don't address the root causes and help people heal, they're never going to truly be, able to be empowered to reach their full potential. And they have it, and the individuals that we meet every single day, they have amazing potential, but life gets in the way, or, outside influences get in the way, harmful political policies get in the way, like that. It's usually outside triggers that create this. And if we had every single person in our community, including our vulnerable, and everyone had the tools and resources and community to be able to fully reach their potential, our world would be a different place. We would be bringing the best of everybody out. Yeah. And we would solve and be a much more beautiful and a much more even probably progressive place in terms of, everyone's best potential all being brought together as one.
Yes, absolutely. So for those of you who don't know, I know you kind of just did a little sneak peek into it, but for those who don't know or aren't that familiar with Catholic Charities, how would you describe the heart behind what we do and how we show up for people?
Yeah, I mean, that's what really has kept me at Catholic Charities for 16 years is we are different. We are different than any nonprofit. And it's in a couple of different ways. One of the ways I really first recognized how we were different was being at our annual gathering a few more years into my career, and looking around the room and seeing hundreds of other people fighting the social injustices in their community. And I realized I was part of a national movement to address social injustice and across the nation. And that's a powerful thing to do and to be a part of. And every Catholic Charities is different for their unique community. And we're different than the next Catholic Charities, but the fact that at the heart of what we do is social justice and that we are the largest private provider of social services in the nation is pretty humbling to know. But what makes us different and why I think that drives us is, the why, the purpose and the reason being behind it. And really we are rooted in a message of the gospel to care for the poor and vulnerable, to create a more just and empathetic world for the most marginalized. And Catholic Charities leans into the people that everyone else kind of leans away from. We serve the people that most would not or choose not to serve. And instead of saying, well, not us either, we say those are our people. Those are the people we seek. And a lot of it's grounded in the story of the Good Samaritan, right? Like you know this parable where there was a man who was left half dead, beaten by robbers. And he's on the side of the street. And as you see, you hear multiple people walk by him and just ignore him. But then there was one individual who took mercy on him, took care of him, helped him get into, an inn to get stabilized and to get hope. And that's Catholic Charities. We are the Samaritan and the innkeeper in many ways, right? And and if you think of in our larger community, how many times people have walked by someone who's homeless on our streets or someone who's experiencing a mental health crisis in our community? How many times do we drive by or walk by? The difference is the people that are at Catholic Charities are not the people who drive by and walk by. They are the people who lean in and they lean into that work and they care for that individual and they see them as a human being worthy of so much care and love and hope.
I love that. And I know that you speak a lot to like the inherent born dignity that every person has. And when it comes to the marginalized population that we serve, what kind of impact do you see when we come with this approach of healing the person and not just the challenge?
Yeah, I think it's not, there's two approaches, right? Why I love working at Catholic Charities is we see past just the initial presentation of what might be happening, right? Like someone who's having a bad mental health day, right? And how that might manifest. It doesn't always manifest in ways that are positive, right? But we can recognize and understand that there is still a person that is struggling, and it is not necessarily, their fault that this is happening. And being able to understand and recognize that has really helped us to see past the initial challenges that might be there and realize, okay, if we want to help this individual, we've got to get them into the right mental health care, for example, or the right housing to be able to provide them supportive case management. Those are the things that that we are able to see past, and we never give up. That's one thing that I'm very proud of our teams that work on the front lines. They could be talking with someone at one moment and realize this is not the day to talk together. We'll be back tomorrow. And they do show back up. And sometimes it takes that 10, 11, 12 interactions just to build trust, because most of these individuals have been like left out of society. They have, trust has been broken by every person who's close to them, by every, safety net that's supposed to help them. You don't just become homeless overnight. It is a series of challenges that lead you to that. And I think that's where we're different is we don't, if someone's having a bad day, we don't say, okay, well, let us know when it's better. It's like, no, we're going to go seek you out the next day and see if things are better. And we're going to figure it out together and be patient and respect their individual journey.
I love that. So true. Besides being our CEO, you've used the phrase building bridges often, and it's a big reason why I wanted to start this podcast off with you. So what does that mean to you, and why is it so important?
Yeah, I think this is something that I feel like is, it's so important. In every part of what we do, but particularly in the area of social services and particularly in some of the areas that we serve in, right? Like homelessness and immigration. Like, when we think about serving, we're not just serving the person, which is our first priority. We're also working to make our community better by helping this social issue or helping these individuals, right? For example, like homelessness does affect different sectors of our community, right? It does affect our downtowns, our economic vitality. It does affect our parks and our neighborhoods. And for me, what's something that a different approach I've taken than maybe other homeless service providers have is let's build those bridges with those communities and let's work on this issue together. Because at the end of the day, whether you're a concerned neighbor or, a downtown business owner or a, homeless service provider like us, one thing is we all can agree less homelessness is better. Right. So if we have a shared end goal, we can figure out how to get there together versus, necessarily pointing blame or creating unhealthy working relationships or just giving up on one another because we have different perspectives. It's like we need to understand each other's perspectives, know we have the same goal, and figure out a pathway to get there. And that is the only way we're going to solve these issues, because it can't just be Catholic Charities alone. It has to be, community driven. And I think, communities can choose whether or not homelessness should exist in their community, because we know how to solve it. We know how to look at things differently. It's just the resources and the public understanding of how we do it together. So building those bridges into communities that this isn't their full-time job is incredibly important, or else we're not going to get there if we don't get there together.
It takes a village.
Yes, a very big village.
Can you share a time when building a bridge, maybe with a city leader, another nonprofit, or even a donor, led to real change?
Yeah, I'll say there's a couple that come to mind. The first one I'll talk about is in the area of homelessness and then immigration. So homelessness is obviously, as I mentioned, is, it has different impacts on our community. And one of them has been encampments over the years. And locally in Sonoma County, we've had, our challenges with encampments over the years. And one of the things that I still haven't seen to this day with other government agencies was how we were able to work with the city of Santa Rosa to address encampments in their community. And we had one significant encampment. It was kind of the first one we were going to have to work on. It was called the Farmers Lane Extension one. There's about 50 individuals who've been living there for a very long time, some of them for years. Uh-huh. And it was becoming very dangerous for the individuals and for that part of the community, with a lot of different reasons. And so the city knew it was something they were going to have to address. But rather than taking an enforcement approach and just moving people to other parts of the city, they partnered with us and said, how do we take a services first approach? How do we maybe readjust how our services are deployed to make it more accessible for the individuals to be able to receive those services? So they were up there in the encampment with us, listening to the clients, talking to them about, what do you need? What is something we can provide? And we were able to get almost everybody into a form of a service. Wow. And just to see an agency, a government entity take that kind of compassionate approach and realize that just enforcement doesn't necessarily mean it goes away. It just moves it. And knowing that we can actually help solve it potentially was something that was just radical. And to this day, we have a great partnership with the city and the police department. And they always kind of call us first when something like that has to happen. So that's been a great opportunity to be able to work with a government entity. And then in immigration, it's somewhat well known, but we received a significant funding reduction from the federal government. We had about 12 hours notice that this important funding for individuals who are legal permanent residents was going to be taken away. And we were kind of given a moment where we had to decide, are we going to close the services? Are we going to continue them? And most of the agencies across the nation that received the same funding reduction most of them said we're going to have to close the services. And after some of our own discernment, we realized we can't do that. Not only do we need to keep the services, we need to increase and accelerate the services to get people more protected legal status. And we had to believe that the partnerships would be inspired by taking that stand and would help us be able to fund the services. And I have been so honored and proud that we've had several organizations, private foundations, businesses, and even more exciting individuals step up and be able to help us fund these services to make sure that we do not make them disappear. But it really started with, we can't stop. We have to go, and we have to trust that our community will be there for us to help get these services to the individuals. And so it has been just a wonderful opportunity to build bridges with even entities that we haven't necessarily been as engaged with. But now that we have a united goal to help our immigrant community and protect here locally, from what might be happening on a national level, it's created like a grassroots movement of people who are inspired to help our immigrant community feel safe and to make sure that they are not forgotten, at least here locally, that they feel that they have belonging and that the community is behind them. So that has been a really powerful moment. But it started with taking a stand and standing up for the rights of the people that we serve. And again, focusing in on the justice element of what we do.
I think Lisette shared this stat with me the other day, and it was only 2% of practicing lawyers in the state of California are immigration attorneys. Yeah. So I think when people say, oh, well, they should just go to an attorney, but there's so many out there, and there's so many immigrants out there, and there's so few actual resources, that organization like ours are essential to keep this kind of effort alive and going for the immigrant community.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there's definitely a shortage of resources, but there's also there's an accessibility factor, right? Again, we're talking about individuals who right now are terrified to go to work. And because of what's happening, the hateful rhetoric and the things that are happening across the nation. And so to get them more secure status, to be able to go back to work, right? They don't have the income to do that. And so when we talk about justice and access, that's what the immigration services we provide are. It creates a much more accessible version. But not only, again, kind of back to what I was talking about, it's not just helping the individual, it helps our community. There's a ton of data that shows embracing our immigrant community and providing pathways to citizenship and legal status not only creates huge economic spending power in our communities and across the nation, it actually reduces the national deficit. And these individuals pay taxes. So they're part of, the local government, the state government, the federal government. If we take away those individuals, put aside the dignity perspective and the injustice of that, and just look at the economic impact, our nation will halt in its course. It cannot survive without our immigrant community. And the work we do is not just to help those individuals, it's to help our nation and to help our communities be able to continue to work alongside these individuals. And we are better because of it, not worse. And they are part of the solution versus what the national rhetoric might say. They are not the burden. They are a part of our solution.
Absolutely. So what built bridges? I know we've kind of looked at little gaps that we have here and there. What bridge do you feel still needs to be built in this region?
In this region, I feel very blessed. And again, having kind of a national group of colleagues and hearing some of the challenges, the struggles that they have, in terms of some of the typical bridges that would first spring to your mind, we do feel blessed that we do have, individuals who support us and who want to help us, whether it's giving $20 or giving $200 or giving their time or giving their thought partnership. We are very blessed in that way. I think some of the areas that we're particularly interested in approaching and building some bridges is our more rural communities, especially looking up in Northern California. As we as we see what's happening on a national level and locally too, right? We're experiencing budget crises at local levels that aren't necessarily philosophical crises that they might be at a national level. Um, Rural communities and smaller nonprofits are gonna struggle. And so how do we leverage again our national network, our statewide network, and the infrastructure we have to help those communities not lose vital services and possibly even bring more services because the need is going to be great over the next few years. We're already seeing increases in our food distribution sites and people coming to our front desk for immigration services. We're seeing an increase in family homelessness. We know the need is growing, and it's going to grow even more over the next couple of years during this economic uncertain time. And so how do we look at our rural communities, our smaller organizations, and help make sure that they don't lose what's so important for the safety nets of their network?
So true. You've led us through some challenges, just a few.
Just a couple.
Just a couple, like the Tubbs fire, COVID, recent funding shifts. What helps you continue to lead with hope?
That's a great question. This work is in general, not just Catholic Charities, like it's there's a high burnout rate. It is hard. You're dealing with individuals in the most stressful and highest crisis point in their life. You're dealing with community that sometimes is in chaos at one moment, like the Tubbs fire or the subsequent fires from there. Like you're having to reinvent everything with a pandemic or, the shifting funding streams, all while not losing your own hope. Because once we do that, we won't be as effective. I think what gives me hope is really knowing the individuals. I feel incredibly blessed to be a CEO that started in the front lines of our shelter. I believe that is a strength that has allowed me to grow within the agency, but also know what it's like and have those individual stories of people whose lives we have changed. And as you move into more administration, you don't get that as much, but I still have those. I still remember those people. I can call them by name. And that gives me a lot of hope. I think what we do and why we do it, helping the most vulnerable, advocating for the most vulnerable, the social justice continues to help drive me, knowing that we cannot give up. But probably the thing that right now inspires me the most is our employees. When I get a chance to spend time with them, there is this shared love and shared compassion that is hard to really describe. And you just know that they are out there fighting for the rights of our clients and they just never give up. And their patience and their empathy is just, it's inspiring, and it keeps me going, that I got to keep doing my part. I've got to keep speaking up or finding the funding or, educating our community about what we need to do. Because they're doing just heroes work. And it's so inspiring every time I get to talk with them, just even for a few minutes. It leaves me feeling rejuvenated and ready to kind of take on the next battle and do what I need to do to give them what they need to be successful.
Absolutely. I think that's one of the things that drives me every day. Like, I always tell people outside of work that I always leave work inspired every single day. And it's not just by the clients, but it's by the people that we work with, because you can, like, the passion behind it is so palpable.
Yeah, you can't, unless you work in here in this agency or you volunteers or donors, or I consider them part of it too. You have to have a special servant's heart to be able to understand the work we're doing and why we're doing it, and to really be able to support it, again, from a variety of ways, whether it's work, volunteering, donor, partnership building. We're different. Catholic Charities is different. And it's in what I believe is all the good ways, which is why I've never left. It's from the front lines into this role. We're grounded in serving not just the vulnerable, but the most vulnerable. And that word, the most, is what sets us apart and is why I keep doing this work, because we are reaching the people that no one got to or no one could get to. And all I wanted growing up was something like that. And so being able to empathize and fight for that gives me great hope every day. Even when it's a challenging day, it's still great hope.
So inspiring. What advice would you give to someone who is just beginning their journey into community work? There's so many people, I feel, not just in the nonprofit world, but are seeing challenges and are wanting to give back and are just starting. So what advice would you give to them?
It's a great question. We need more people fighting the social justice fight. um, and there's so many different issues to take up. My advice to individuals is twofold. One is find the topic that brings you passion, and maybe one that you can empathize with, that maybe correlates to a piece of your journey, and really dig deep to why you feel so connected to that issue. Because if you can feel that deep connection to the issue, you will be able to survive through the challenges of doing this work, because it is incredibly challenging work, but it's incredibly necessary work. And the second part I would encourage is to think about how you are deploying the services, social services, charity and kind of this work over the years. We're dealing with incredibly complex issues, and charity just handing out, food while help somebody in the moment is not going to solve the crisis and the social justice issue. That's the bigger problem. And so think about how you're delivering service. It can't just be a delivery of food. It needs to be a delivery of food with case management, or it needs to be looking at, if you've only got 3 housing beds, but in 20 people, how are you going to help the person who needs it the most, who's probably going to die on our streets if we don't get them? Not the person who can maybe self-advocate or self-navigate the best, the person who probably can't do that and are most likely to die if we don't give them these services. And that's a shift in the way social services has happened over the last, 10 years, is really thinking about how we deploy the services more efficiently on a need based, not a first come based service, and really addressing the core of the issue, not just the symptom of what might be going on. Because continuing to have somebody show up for food is not solving it. It's really continuing to have that person living in crisis, in trauma, and it usually creates more issues versus actually solving the crisis and the issue for the person.
Absolutely. So we're coming to the end of the episode, but I wanted to close it off by kind of taking a step back and looking at this from a higher level. What would you say if you could leave our listeners with one reminder about their role in this work, even if they're not in the nonprofit world? What would it be?
Every single person in our community has a role to play in addressing the social justice issues in our community. Community is only as good as the person who is suffering the most. And if we do not look at how we can collectively solve these issues, we are not holding the best community, creating the best community, and helping the most vulnerable as we should be. And it doesn't have to be that everyone joins the nonprofit field or donates or volunteers. Those things are incredible and we need them. Don't get me wrong. But it's also being understanding and being curious, asking more questions, not jumping to a snap judgment about an individual or an agency and what's going on. I think a lot of what's going on in a lot of different parts of our world is we've lost our curiosity. We've jumped to conclusions without doing a deeper dive into the reality of what's going on. So I encourage people to be curious. If something doesn't seem right, ask questions, reach out. Let's see what we can do together. But, passing judgments on individuals in crisis or continuing to spread things that are not true about what might be or not going on, what might be going on or not going on, it's distracting to the solution. And I can't tell you how many times I've had to correct wild mistruths about a lot of things. And I'm always willing to have the tough conversation. Just need people to be curious and willing to reach out to learn more. And I can learn more from them too, and how it might be impacting, the community. But if we don't have an open dialogue, if we don't have curiosity, we continue to have silos and we can't build bridges together.
Absolutely. I love that we shouldn't be focusing and assuming the negative and making a connection that our assumptions are fact. It's so important to stay curious and learn more.
Mm-hmm. And me too. I can always learn more, and I always want to be in a learning mode. But when it comes to like issues like homelessness and immigration and other social issues, I hear a lot of mistruths out there.
Yes.
And if there's a professional in a certain sector I don't understand, like maybe tax credits, I'm gonna go seek the expert, right? I'm not gonna try to assume I know. And the same would be true of working in human services, right? If you want to learn more about it, seek the people who are doing the work, and let's talk.
Great analogy, yes. Well, Jennielynn, thank you so much for sharing your journey and for all that you do to lead with vision, compassion, and a deep sense of purpose.
Oh, it's been very fun to talk. Hopefully it's not too much talking.
No, I'm sure everyone has left inspired. And thank you to everyone listening. This is just the beginning. Every one of us has a role in bridging our community, whether it's through action, partnership, or simply listening and learning. Be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. And if you'd like to learn more or get involved, you can visit us at ccnwc.org. Until next time, let's keep building bridges together.